Well, I think everyone's well aware of Arizona's immigration law, SB 1070, as it took center stage last year in the courts and even made it all the way to the Supreme Court, where they upheld certain provisions like the papers, please part of it. Doesn't mean that Arizona Governor Jan Brewer has had enough. No, in fact, she is now going back to federal court to now try to go against to try to continue on with parts of Arizona's law and appeal a judge's ruling that went against the part of the law that would make it a crime to harbor undocumented immigrants. But you have to start asking where this fight is really getting the state of Arizona and other states that have passed tough immigration laws. Some people would argue that it's become a form of economic suicide. So here to discuss this with me in our Google Hangout, we have Nomiki Konst, political activist in New York. From Washington, D.C., Alex Nowrasteh, an immigration policy analyst at the Cato Institute. And from Detroit, Michigan, Shikha Dalmia, a senior policy analyst at the Reason Foundation. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Alex, right? I mean, you had an entire piece about this that you wrote. So can you give us some of the details?
Yeah, well, you can really take a look at these, both of these Arizona immigration laws as different parts of the same effort. I mean, one was to regulate the business place, to regulate unauthorized immigrants out of the economy. The other one was to SB 1070, was to use police power to regulate immigrants out of the state after that effect. Now, what you saw was directly after the impact of the first Arizona law, passed in 2007, you saw an immediate drop-off in the business formation rate in Arizona that was minus 15%. Now, compared to other states in the union and other states neighboring Arizona at that time, for those other states, there was basically no change. But in that state, there was a huge drop-off in entrepreneurship at the same time, because a lot of the provisions of this early law included stuff like the business death penalty, which would revoke the licenses of businesses that are started in the state if they intentionally or knowingly hire an unauthorized worker for a second occasion. There are numerous anecdotes and occasions of people saying that they don't want to expand business in the state, they don't want to move there in the first place because they are afraid of things like the business death penalty. Another horrible thing that the state did was they created the E-Verify system, electronic verification for employers, which basically means that for every employee hired in the state, an employer had to run their information through a federal database now to make sure that they're legal. Now, what this does is put a tax immediately on the cost of hiring workers up front, which is not what you want to do during a slow economy.
Arizona is a dynamic state. It's a state that's gone through huge demographic changes over the past 10 years. It's gone through cultural shifts. It's gone through political shifts. It's gone through age shifts. I mean, it is a place where you have a huge influx of people coming from the Midwest to start companies. And that's actually where a majority of these industries have started. You had major corporations locate to Arizona, not because of cheap labor or illegal labor, but because there were economic opportunities. The problem is the housing bust happened, and just like it happened all over the country, it happened in Phoenix, where there were a high concentration of new businesses and major large companies.
A lot of immigrants in Arizona worked in the construction industry. So they were drawn to the state because of that reason, as well as other reasons, to work in the booming construction industry. Another reason in which it's related is that immigrants, like other people, buy and live in real estate. Now, what's interesting is when you take a look at the vacancy rates in Arizona versus its neighboring states, you see the vacancy rates in apartments and housing skyrocket after the passage of the Legal Arizona Workers Act, and even go higher after the passage of SB 1070. Now, unless you want to tell me that rental vacancy rates in states have nothing to do with pushing down real estate prices, then there is definitely a correlation there. And there's a lot of economic studies about the supply of people in a city and how that supply of people influences housing prices. And what you see is you diminish the population of a place by 1%, you basically get a 1% decrease in housing prices. Now, that doesn't mean that every bit of decrease in housing prices was caused.
All right, let's get Shikha in here because we haven't heard from her in a little bit. And Shikha, if you can make it quick, because we have to wrap it up soon, but there's one other point that I really want to get to.
Well, okay, very quickly, I mean, abstract, going a little bit, away from Alex's study. I mean, look, if you just look at the evidence around you, we can debate whether the exodus of immigrants in Arizona has caused the economic situation to worsen or not. However, what is not debatable is that the most vibrant cities are the ones where there's a large immigrant presence, whether it is New York or whether it is California or whether it is Texas. And it is not smart for cities and states to drive these people out. In fact, the correlation between immigration and economic vibrancy is so strong that Detroit, which is where I live, is actually trying to attract these refugees from Arizona and other states to itself. Because the theory is that, they'll come and they have superior entrepreneurship skills and they'll, repopulate the city, pay more taxes, and you'll jumpstart the city. Now, I think there's a problem with that thesis, but at least it's operating on a good hypothesis over here, which is that there is an undeniable correlation between immigration and economic vibrancy.